Are rich people crooks and evil? Well, the guy I admire most of all time is Benjamin Franklin. And I think he got one thing wrong. He said farmers are wonderful jewels. They take one seed, they put it in the ground, and they pull out 1,000 seeds, enough to feed a lot of people and to plant a much bigger crop the next year. He thought anybody who can do that is wonderful. And the people he didn't like, he called them stock jobbers. And what he meant by that was people who bought things at one price and sold them at a higher price. He thought that was kind of a robbery. And here's where we disagree very substantially. Okay, I have a Chinese chest that someone many years ago must have paid the equivalent of a couple $1,000 for. But I have no use for it. So I would sell it for, a couple $100. Now, if the person I sell it to sells it for much more and makes a profit, I don't think he's a bad guy. Why? Because he's taken something off my hands that I don't want, and someone who needs it and wants something like that got what he wanted. So the role of an intermediary, to me, a person who buys and sells things at a profit, is quite okay. Now, another friend of mine once had a job. Well, he would fix up old houses. He would buy houses that smelled of cat pee or needed paint jobs or were in bad shape. And he would take these houses and fix them up. And then he would either sell them or rent them. And the newspaper, this was in a suburb in the USA, and the newspapers, or the local newspaper, once did what they call a hatchet job on the guy. They said, he is a terrible person, a speculator who's driving up the price of property, and the poor people in this town can't even afford it anymore. Well, just like the person who buys and sells at a profit, that is nonsense, because this guy was taking maybe an abandoned house, a junk house, or something that needed upgrading badly, and he fixed it up with his own hands. He painted it, he put shingles on it, whatever it needed, replaced bad plumbing, and the next thing I know, he sold it or rented it out at a profit to himself. So the person who rented it needed a place and has a place and is happy with it. The old owner of the property, who maybe was an heir who lived in Argentina and didn't care a bit about it, got some money, and the person who manages the property improves the local stock. So he's not evil. He's a God's gift to humanity. Now, when you take a whole society, a whole bunch of people, I remember socialist England. This is before Margaret Thatcher came in. In socialist England, the general attitude of people was, oh, there's a rich guy. How can we take his money and his assets and redistribute them? Huh. Terrific. Well, at the same time, in the United States, where there was a lot more prosperity because we were capitalists and in those days libertarian, that is to say the free market ruled, the typical working guy said, oh, there's a rich guy. You know what? I want to do whatever he's doing. I want to start a business or get rich like him. Quite a contrast between there's a rich guy and I want to take his assets and redistribute them. The whole point of communism, I shouldn't say the point, but the result is everybody goes to the lowest possible common denominator. I used to go to Russia a lot, and everybody was poor. They all wore the same crappy raincoat. They all had cardboard shoes. They all ate in lousy restaurants where there was not even seats for two or three at a table. You had to sit at a long table. So I have had experience with free market and capitalism, and I've had experience with socialism and communism, and hey, there is no comparison. There's infinitely more prosperity with capitalism. Now, part of this video is being inspired by a relative I had who called herself a Marxist. And this young lady, she was eager to protest in any cause that was momentarily popular, and she didn't seem to realize that wherever this collective sort of approach was given, there was nothing but poverty, and wherever there was a free market was just the opposite. Okay, you're going to say, oh, but socialism is pretty popular in Denmark and Norway and Sweden. Well, that is because Norway, for instance, sits on a big pile of oil. So even if a government is inefficient and corrupt, if you're sitting on a natural resource and the population isn't too big, you can do pretty good for the citizens. There's a little tiny country in this world called Brunei. And the Sultan of Brunei is one of the richest guys in the world for no particular reason, except that there's a lot of oil underneath the few acres that are considered Brunei. And so not only he has a 2,000 room palace and a couple of yachts that he's cleverly named Tits and Ass, but the population of Brunei is doing pretty well too, because there's so much wealth that he can take 90% of it, and the 10% that's left for the people is still a lot. Okay, so there's my little rant and rave for today. Now, getting back to, are rich people evil? Well, normally, rich people have created or are involved with some kind of product or service that the world wants. So is Bill Gates an evil criminal? No. He brought us basically the computer we have today and Windows. Now, he didn't do the coding, the original coding, but he figured out how to market it and distribute it, and the world voted for him by buying his product. Same with Jeff Bezos of Amazon. He saw a need and he filled it. In early days, Amazon was struggling, and the only product was the books. And he transformed that market, and now the online market is, not dominant by a long shot. I think it's only about 2% of all sales, but still, his Amazon is now one of the biggest companies, maybe even a little bigger than Walmart. Okay. Now, next topic is, do the rich control the world? Well, when I lived in Monaco, there were an awful lot of rich people. In fact, if you exclude the native population who works at and gets paid very well for servicing the rich, the fact is 50 million bucks or 50 million euros would be about average for the population of Monaco. And I knew a lot of these people. What do they have to say about ruling the world? Well, they have absolutely no influence in ruling the world. Most of them are in Monaco because they were scared and upset by the fact that the tax collectors in their own country were harassing them endlessly and auditing them, and in some few places that have actually jail time for people who don't pay their taxes, they were threatened with jail. So they moved to Monaco, and at least that solved one of their problems of they don't have any tax worries anymore, because that's why Monaco is so popular with millionaires and billionaires, no taxes. Okay, now, next little bitty topic is, I don't know why some people on the internet are so the word intoxicated? No, so obsessed with Jews. I saw on the internet a guy who says, I live in New York. In New York, I make about $120,000 a year, which is, for the rest of the world, a huge amount. But in New York, it's barely surviving. Half my money goes for rent, and 120 gets nowhere. But I hear that the Jews control the world. Now, I happen to be Jewish, and nobody's invited me to help rule the world. And all my friends, they're like me. They make, not so much money. Well, a lot by some people's standards, but not really enough to be splash out. We can't even afford a car in the garage. Well, in any event, we certainly don't rule the world. None of my friends are involved in secret meetings to decide what's going to happen in the world, and I'm certainly not. If anybody out there is one of them Jewish world rulers, please invite me, because I want to get a piece of that action. Okay. Oh, and then there's another thing. For every rich Jew in the world, there's probably 1,000 rich non-Jews. So why do people harp on stuff like that? I read once, just yesterday, these trillionaires control the world. And then they talk about Goldman Sachs. Hey, the original Goldman and the original Sachs are long dead. And I doubt that their heirs have more than 1 or 2% of Goldman Sachs anymore. And do they worry about ruling the world or have anything to say? No way. They're probably in Monaco to avoid being harassed by the taxman. I know you've been waiting for the bang up finish that I always give you on these wonderful videos. And here's the bang up finish. The leftists and the communists think that there's a pie, and the pie has to be divided up equally among all the people. But the capitalists and the libertarians think the pie is infinite. Now think about that. In other words, if someone comes along and with a new product, like Musk is doing all the time, Elon Musk, he's coming up with the Tesla and brain implants and rocket ships. So he's expanding the pie, and he's very rich, and his riches come from stock in companies and products that didn't even exist 15 or 20 years ago. So there's our bang up finish for today. The pie is getting bigger and bigger as long as the government stays out. Government is the problem, not the solution. And I'm really looking forward to what's going on in Argentina, where the first libertarian ever is in control of a whole government. I don't have too much hope for him, because one man, he's not a dictator, and he has to deal with the legislature and a lot of other politicians and factors. But let's hope that his basic idea for getting the government out of things and letting people get rich continues. And that's for today.